Hello, I'm Barbara Charles. I'm also a board member, although this is now my second year. A lot of the first year people have been introducing. I'm going to make a pitch before I introduce the next speaker. We have a mid-year meeting someplace else in the country so that we're not so New England-centric. And our upcoming one will be in October in Ann Arbor. And there'll be 2 days of visiting both institutional and private collections, and then the third day the board meets. And everybody is welcome to come to the 2 days of institutional and collections. And there's also a book fair in Lansing, and so it's probably the third week of October. We're trying to finalize it, but I would like to welcome any of you to come. We have great fun. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Sheng-mei Ma, who I believe in this conference of immigrants may be the only immigrant speaker. And Dr. Ma was born in Taiwan. He's a professor of English at Michigan State University, and English is his second language. And he does a lot of writing, and he specializes in the Asian diaspora and Asian American literature and film. He's author of 9 books, editor of 3, and his forthcoming book, soon off the press, is Off-White, Yellowface, and Chinglish by Anglo-American Culture. So he's really looking at it, the American perspective on the Chinese immigrant. Welcome.
Do I press this thing to move the slides? Let me try.
You may, yes, the silver thing.
Silver thing. Okay.
I think the right one is forward and the left one is back.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Yeah. I want to thank Barbara and the Ephemeral Society for giving this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. There's actually 2 minor typos. One, of course, is what's up, somewhat. Both UP has to be capitalized. In the program, it was not. So that's one. UP, of course, refers to both going up as well as to Upper Peninsula of Michigan, UP. And the second typo, of course, is the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is 1882, not 86. One photograph haunts me, one on downtown Houghton in Michigan Technological University Library's J.W. Nara photograph collection. Desolate dirt roads intersect at a 2-story corner store, a typical frontier scene from Michigan's Upper Peninsula, UP, Copper Country, around the turn of the last century. This image is accompanied by a blown-up detail on its left edge, which shows part of the next building with a Sam-Watt laundry shop front and 2 men of vaguely Asian features in Western suits standing in front, one of whom leaning on a bicycle. During the Chinese Exclusion Act, Chinese laundrymen had clearly managed to eke out a living away from Chinatowns on the coastal and metropolitan areas, wherever menial labor was required. At least one Samoa landed in the farthest reaches of the Midwest, which comedian Margaret Cho satirizes as the mid-waste. Name-calling the white-dominated Midwest, Margaret Cho, in her coastal elite mentality, may in fact be displacing minority anxiety over their identity as unseemly, not to be seen, waste matter, expelled by America's body politic. Nonetheless, just as one anonymous viewer comments offhandedly on this particular image in the Nara collection, quote, "Seems like every town in the Copper Country had a Chinese laundry." The collection's photographs of Calumet and other towns appear to confirm such sightings of Chinese laundrymen. Arthur W. Thurner documents in Strangers and Sojourners, A History of Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula, a number of these Chinese laundrymen. One interviewee, Annie Aldrich, recalls, in 1930s, Nan Li's shop, filled with packages of laundered shirts, seems a house of horror to some small boys whose parents had threatened to sell them to the Chinese proprietor to be butchered for chop suey. One lad remembered being sent there for his father's shirt collar and discovering Nan Li to be a jolly, friendly, enthusiastic man. Aldrich's testimony reveals the lore instilled in the next generation by the parents, who unthinkingly merges the two survival skills of Chinese immigrants, restaurant and laundry, essential businesses feeding and clothing Americans. Given that Chinese immigrants did not enjoy much avenue for career advancement beyond these traditionally female roles, it is telling that a local lore would be eating the Chinese other, their food as well as their cheap labor, while having them around as the exhibit for the ultimate other, the house of horror. Not to mince words, the Upper Peninsula small towns eat their chink and have him too. That this is a popular lore is confirmed by the plot of Lon Chaney's silent film Shadows, where a boy comes to befriend the monstrosity of a Chinese laundryman. In Alma W. Swinton's I Marry a Doctor, live in Ontonagon, Michigan from 1900 to 1919, an Ontonagon newspaper on the 13th of April, 1907, noted that the town had, and I quote, only one chink, and like most of his ilk, he has an inquiring mind and a thirst for the coin of the realm. He is not averse to turning a few cartwheels in other lines, although washi-washi is his regular vocation. The newspaper article's usage of derogatory terms is the rule, not the exception of the day. It also brings out the duality attributed to the other, source of unknown mystery and horror, but always stupid and comical. Why did Sam Hua, Nan Li, Ontonagon's one chink, and fellow compatriots of yesteryear choose a life in the midst of what Margaret Cho and her cohort see today as the flyover wasteland? Was it to ensure plenty of washing? Who was Sam Hua? His familiar anglicized first name is undercut by a strange foreign surname, an ominous homophone of what? So what exactly was UP or Upper Peninsula to Sam Hua, and vice versa? Symbolically, though, UP implies going up, an ascent from the earth, dirt, and sweat. Cleanliness restores the purity of white and other unblemished color. It signals the desire to be unto oneself, which ironically points to a levitation above the self. The psychic sleight of hand vests in whiteness, particularly the white skin, an almost airy, ethereal, out-of-body transcendence. Whitewashing turns into a double entendre. By flushing non-whites out of historical memory and spatial existence, whites make themselves cleaner, higher, more upward bound. Given the passage of time and the scarcity of local documents on Chinese sojourners, any historical questions is well-nigh impossible to answer. Chinaman, after all, only enjoys a Chinaman's chance of ever leaving behind any trace. Their role in early 20th century U.S. history has been to service white clientele while being whitewashed into oblivion. In the photograph in question, for example, Samoa laundry is so close to the frame that only a blow-up shines light on a Chinese laundry. A positivistic sociological approach may thus prove futile beyond heavy concentrations of ethnic minorities, such as Chinatowns in Paul C.P. Seuss, The Chinese Laundryman, A Study in Social Isolation, or in H.T. Zhen's novel, And China Has Hands. From a literary and cultural studies perspective, however, much can be gleaned. Zhen's ironic title on Chinese cheap labor or hands, for instance, undergoes a makeover in the Chinese title, 出番记, going out amongst the barbarians. Zhen's Chinese title inflects an immigrant story of hardships and humiliation with traditional Sinocentric superiority complex, muting from the outset the novel's very bleak self-abjection. To contextualize Samoa with Sui, Po Sui, and Zhen, if Zhen's New York laundryman evinces isolation, Samoa in Houghton, Michigan is surely an extraterrestrial alien. Although few in number, these aliens come to populate, even crowd, American pop culture during the span of the Chinese Exclusion Act and beyond. Such ephemeral, all but forgotten sightings of Chinese laundrymen include comics, newspaper editorial cartoons, and Lon Chaney's yellow-faced laundryman in Shadows. The St. Louis Republic published a revealing comic cartoon in 1901, The Chink Family Robinson at Work. The Missouri newspaper cartoon gives a racist spin to Johann David Weiss's German language The Swiss Family Robinson, which in itself is a spin-off from Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe. Defoe's lone Englishman pioneers the British Empire's colonialism in far-flung corners. Weiss domesticates individual heroism. Now a family enterprise as the Robinsons are stranded on a tropical island, besieged by a motley crew of pirates, played by actors of color in the 1960s Disney family film, including Sesue Hayakawa as the pirate leader. The St. Louis Republic perpetrates not only bigotry, but misappropriation when the so-called Chink family Robinsons is anything but a normal family. It consists of 3 males, apparently from 3 generations, possibly a grandfather, father, and son. Unbeknownst to the newspaper, its comic has captured the reality of Chinese bachelor community across the land since the Chinese Exclusion Act had prevented family reunion, especially the entry of Chinese women. The trio are related imagistically, if not genetically, most conspicuous in their wooden legs. This shared physical disability silhouettes American perception of the Chinese as a biological deviation to the point of subhuman. In stereotypical garbs, slant eyes, long hair queues, goatees, that appear quite content with their lot in life, with idiotic grins on 2 of the 3 faces. The grandfather and father figures have their queues tied into a clothesline to dry the washing, with the shortest male, perhaps also the youngest yet to grow his goatees, standing on a stool to hang up articles of clothing. So natural is this bizarre practice of drying that they even read books and smoke. The frame is chock full of stereotypes other than the freakish, one-legged Chinese bodies. It contains the grooved wooden washboard in the tub, a steam iron on the table, an oriental screen in the back, and 2 staggered vertical doodling on the wall right next to the screen. The last item supposedly duplicates the Chinese Spring Festival couplet, i.e. Chinese calligraphy in black ink on red paper pasted on either side of the doorframe, usually flushed with the top of the door, invariably parallel to each other. Not only are the comics random scribbling on the couplet self-defeating, but the different heights of the couplet give itself away as fake. The caption hanging from the bamboo frame of the comic almost validates all the distortions. No tiki, no shirty. The long E suffix anglicizes and estranges supposedly alien sounds for English speakers. Rather than an auditory reproduction of the other's pidgin, the Anglophone culture betrays its own neurotic fixation, its own neuro-Tourette tics in dubbing any Oriental from his pen or camera with a long E sound. Semantic and cinematic Orientalism remains largely undiagnosed, untreated. The fabricated togetherness of a Chink family Robinson can be easily ripped apart in American pop culture. Literally, a 1920 cutout toy invites boys and girls to dismember and reassemble Li Ling, Chinese laundryman, who becomes a reified object for child's play. The education of whites begins early in life, with the minority as the plaything, reminiscent of the parents' warning to any truant lad about to be dispatched as chop suey materials. Assembled, one blogger testifies, quote, as Li Ling scrubs laundry, the broom sways back and forth, his head bobs forward as he taps his foot. The action is spectacular, end quote. From the still picture in a St. Louis newspaper to the moving picture of shadows, the Chinese laundryman is a reliable prop in American imaginary of the other. Man of a Thousand Faces, Lon Chaney plays Yan Sin, the Chinese laundryman with all the turn of the last century stereotypical trappings of the rice bowl haircut, slant eyes, buck teeth, a tunic with frock buttons, a skull cap, and platform shoes. Lon Chaney stoops with his arms comically bent behind his torso, shuffling along. A severe case of osteoporosis, the hump-like posture heralds Lon Chaney's magnum opus, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, of the following year. A Chinaman running a laundry service out of a scow comes as a dress rehearsal for the Hunchback on the cathedral's belfry. Both monsters are liminal shadows on the edges of community and consciousness. That shadow sets Yansen washing and ironing on a flat-bottomed boat at the dock like a piece of blossom on the waves, suggests he remains on the notorious emigrant ship. His debut may be the shivering, pitiable wretch rescued from the shipwreck, but he has never landed in America proper. In this figure, for instance, the mise en scène has all the townspeople directing their gaze to the right, where one survivor is laid down, away from the other survivor, Yan Sin, shivering on the left. The townspeople will soon gather for a group prayer for the dead, from which the heathen is banished. Running his laundry service from a scow, Jensen maintains an ambiguous relationship with the community. So outlandish is his appearance that he clearly does not belong, nor does he draw any closer to Christianity since his banishment on the beach. In Paul Seal's words, and I quote, socially he is a stranger. He closely approximates the ideal construction of symbiosis without communication, end quote. Jensen does befriend a boy nicknamed Mr. Bad Boy, with the enticement of the proverbial Chinese sweet lychee. Beyond his three friends, Mr. Bad Boy, the minister Molden, and the angelic sympathy Gibbs, Jensen fits well into Paul Seal's depiction, and I quote again, when the American thinks of the laundryman, he usually thinks of the laundry shop where he takes his white shirts. The person and the institution are the same thing. The Chinese laundryman is, alas, a thing to Americans. Toward the end of the film, Jensen's last act before expiring is to cut loose the scalp, much to the chagrin of the community that has come to appreciate him, so that he can float back to China. Despite a happy ending through Jensen's machination and his deathbed conversion to Christianity, he remains a perennial alien whose home lies elsewhere. His minister friend Malden does Christianize Jensen's homebound scout as returning to the harbor of the Lord. These are all from intertitles of the silent film. But the tension of Christianity and Chinese beliefs, a good Chinaman and a freak, is never fully resolved. The happy ending for the white protagonist comes about only because Jensen has thwarted the antagonist, Nate Snow, a homewrecker. Snow covets his neighbor's wife, Sympathy, remarried to Malden, after her abusive fisherman husband, Daniel Gibbs, had been lost in the sea. Snow orchestrates the return of the dead and forges Daniel's ransom notes to extort a fortune. The minister lives with the sin of having committed bigamy and sired an illegitimate child. Bedridden and near death, Jensen sees through Snow's shenanigans and forces him to confess in a show of Oriental prophecy mixed with homespun common sense. Jensen first observes his pet cat playing with a mouse before pouncing, which leads to his remark in the intertitle right here. Cat say, mousey stay with nicey cat, likey see, mousey jump. The intertitle demonstrates the speech pattern of Jensen's pigeon with a long E sound, not to mention the absence of verb conjugation and proper syntax. As though spring from the delirium of a dying man, these words border on nonsensical gibberish to an unknowing community gathered around his deathbed, but it's also a dog whistle to Nate Snow. Of course, Orientalism has long patented the collaging of nonsense and uber-sense, of being muddle-headed and being the godhead, of the trivial and the transcendent. What seems quizzical to the gathering strikes Nate Snow like a bolt of lightning, whose guilty conscience compels him to confess. This all but exonerates the minister from his sin, except that he has hidden from his family and friends what he believed to be the truth for over a year. The minister forgives Snow, nonetheless, an act of magnanimous grace that convinces the dying Jensen to convert. The superiority of Christianity is further validated as Jensen struggles from his bed to unmoor the scow. Along the way, he bumps into the icon to which he used to light incense and bow down, the statuette of ancestral worship clashing to the boat's floor. Jensen simply shoves it away, a gesture of indifference toward a heathen idol. But this cutting of ancestral ties is complicated by his dying wish to somehow to drift back to his ancestral land. This tension surfaces yet as well in the unconventional method of solving the whodunit by the unlikely detective Jensen. He reads his fellow laundryman Sam Lowe's message on the minister's collar, presumably written in Chinese. Jensen has earlier demonstrated such a four-character notation inside the collar to Mr. Bad Boy. Sam Lowe works in the neighboring town Enfield and is recommended by Jensen to attend to Malden's laundry during the minister's excursion. Played by an Asian actor, this is Sam Lowe, serves as the Dr. Watson to Jensen's Sherlock Holmes. Extras can be Asian in the Hollywood tradition, but the lead must be yellow-faced. Sam Lowe, without a hunchback and swift of foot, follows Nate Snow and discovers his treachery. This is a pattern familiar to Westerners, the comical, rotund, and fortune cookie spewing Charlie Chan is likewise assisted in his investigation by the number one son, more agile, spouting rapid-fire Americanism. The yellow-faced Warner Olin or Sidney Toler of slant-eyed Charlie Chan fame thus commands the number one son, played by Ki Luk or Victor Sam Yoon. This casting formula applies to orientalized females as well, most prominent of which is the pairing of Marlene Dietrich, Shanghai Lily, and Anna May Wong's Chinese prostitute in a Shanghai Express. A coup d'éclat to Nate Snow's scheme, effecting a dramatic twist in the film. Sam Lowe's correspondence to Yanxing may well be encrypted, for no one can read Chinese other than the laundryman. Secrecy in codes is put to good use. But the Oriental imaginary, the shadow network would collapse in no time into conspiracy and xenophobia or xenophobia. Charlie Chan, after all, has an evil twin in Dr. Fu Manchu, whose Oriental operatives infiltrates every corner of the West. In Sax Rohmer's series of mystery, the Yellow Peril conquest of the West is only arrested repeatedly by Nayland Smith and Dr. Petrie, oftentimes with the aid of Fu Manchu's mixed-race slave girl, Karamine, who fell in love with Dr. Petrie. Karamine betrays Fu, and that's justified by her higher love for the white man. This is a narrative strategy to bolster a superior West, no different from Yanxing foregoing his ancestral deities as a result of the minister forgiving Nate Snow. Lon Chaney's Shadow Laundryman is not alone in silent films. Thank you. And let me just skip a little bit. Okay. Exactly because the Chinese laundryman figures so closely to America, ironing out the wrinkles of his shirt and soul, American pop culture has distanced itself by caricaturing him. Exactly because the Chinese laundryman fingers our silk blouse and perhaps even underwear, exemplified by the pair of bloomers in Yanxing's laundry basket, American pop culture has whitewashed him out of existence, bleaching out the dirt and soil from the white skin. The Chinese laundryman is the shadow America drags behind itself. These century-old perennial aliens enjoy longevity in contemporary racism. A case in point, Abercrombie and Fitch designed a line of anti-Asian T-shirt on wide-ranging stereotypes of Chinese chop suey restaurant, the Buddha and Buddhism, and of course, Chinese laundrymen. Specifically, the company features a T-shirt that sports two idiotic-looking Asians in conical or comical peasant hats, soap suds, and Qing Dynasty shirts with frock buttons. The caption reads, "Wong Brothers Laundry Service," and "Two Wongs can make it white." The last phrase harks back to the tired joke on Asian infelicity over the retroflex R, mangling the idiom, quote, "two wrongs don't make a right." The phone number for the laundry service on the T-shirt lists 555 Wang, evoking the illustrated children's book, The Five Chinese Brothers, with five brothers who look exactly alike. The Wang brothers' identical features and blank grins copy those of the children's book, one of the teacher's top 100 books for children. Yet another Hoover advertisement mocks Chinese laundrymen who had apparently lost their jobs to the company's washer. Peering into the washer's black hole, these laundrymen crane their necks, too stupid to be aware of the axe that has already fallen. Any consumer's goodbye equals the minority clown's goodbye to the steam iron in their hand. Hoover's ad evokes the nativist persecution of Chinese workers around the turn of the last century, evidence in the 1883 Missouri steam washer trade card, the Chinese must go. And the steam washer wears Uncle Sam's red striped trousers, which resonate with the stars and stripes of the United States. This image proclaims that the United States, not in Missouri, steam washer alone is kicking out the Chinese laundryman with his bag of money and his washboard. The trade card's 3 place names, however, belie the united front of the United States. The state of Missouri is presented as the synecdoche of the Uncle Sam, assuming the nation's mantle wearing as pants, so to speak. Yet the eviction of the Chinese laundryman involves a lopsided asymmetry from a city to a country, from San Francisco to China. Missouri sees itself as undoing the nation's plight, spreading from the specific locale, the Bay Area, the beachhead of an infestation of the yellow peril. Okay, given the mainstream distortion and repression of such shadows, rare sightings of Chinese laundrymen from the yellow photographs and newspapers and dusty archives constellate, nonetheless, into a vibrant metaphor in ethnic imagination, whereby a racist stereotype and a history of discrimination are repurposed for ethnic pride in global marketing. I'll skip these examples, just mention one, I suppose. An Asian American classic, Maxine Hong Kingston's autobiographical fiction, The Woman Warrior, is set in her Californian family laundry. So the stifling heat and numbing work of the laundry cleansed not only customers' clothing, but also inspired the novelist's quest for ethnic identity. I think I'm going to skip quite a bit of my paper. Basically, I went on to talk about what's happening on the other side of the Pacific Ocean in Asia, how Asian representations of these kind of laundry businesses deal with, but I'll just skip that. In the hands of writers and filmmakers of color, be it Asian American or Asian, the representation of Chinese and Oriental laundrymen gives a new twist to the definition of whitewashing. Whereas mainstream U.S. culture whitewashes minority experience, minorities of color resist being put under erasure. Kingston launches ethnic identity in part from her family laundry service. And I just want to sort of go to a Chinese laundry detergent. This one. This is a Chinese laundry service, laundry advertising. So when this detergent Qiaobi advertises products in 2016, whitewashing acquires a virulent racist strain the Chinese harbor against dark-skinned people. Chinese ads do unto blacks what whites have done to the yellow man. Just as whites hoist themselves on the pedestal of off-white yellows, yellows do the same to off-yellows, if you will. And let me just finish very quickly, having begun with a haunting image of Sam Ma laundry from Michigan's Upper Peninsula, I would be remiss not to close the essay with an exorcism of sorts, a ritual purging, if you will. Thus, it is fitting to conclude with Sam Toy laundry in Park Slope, Brooklyn, New York. Corey Kilgannon reports in He Irons, She Stitches, the moving story of Santoy Laundry. This is a New York Times piece from 2016. The owners, Michael and Judy Huang, purchased the laundry in 1983 from the old-timer they chanced upon at a Key Food supermarket in Park Slope. Because of Judy's flash of kindness in offering her spot in the checkout line to an older man, Ki En Hong, who was furious after having lost his spot somehow. Hong, the previous proprietor, sold his laundry to the Huangs for a pittance with a singular request, and I quote, "Don't change anything here." The most extraordinary part of the report is that Hong returned $2,000 of the $3,000 sales price to the buyer as a good faith gift to the next generation of immigrants determined to keep Sentoi running. A new world business transaction seems straight out of an old world that has long vanished. And I think I'll just stop right here.
Questions? Have we worn everybody out? Okay. Oh, okay.
Two questions. One is, I think, pretty simple, but I just need information. One of my Asian colleagues 15, 20 years ago, at one point, exorcised Oriental as a description of Asian citizens, and I see you using it. Has it come back into usage, or, just inform me.
I use it only in terms of how other people are using it. In other words, I'm almost using it with a quotation
quotes, yeah.
mark, because Orientalism is a loaded word, is heavily laced with colonialism.
Right.
And that, of course, goes back to Edward Said, his classic Orientalism that inaugurated post-colonialism. So this seems to be a term that we sort of turn away from constantly. However, go to any kind of Midwestern towns, you're going to see an Oriental restaurant.
Sure.
Right there. In other words, restaurateurs, as a survival skill, they are very happy, they're quite content to cater to the white clientele. If they think of you as Oriental, we'll go along, and then as long as we can make a buck.
The other question is, quickly, would Chinese coming here from the culture of thousands and thousands of years and extreme sophistication and knowledge and everything, come here and see the white culture as sort of barbarian and could almost absorb a certain amount of humiliation with a kind of an irony?
First of all, the assumption may be quite outdated. I don't really think a lot of Chinese necessarily think of themselves as from 5,000 years of old civilization. It may be at the back of their mind, but I assure you, people coming here to study and to do business and so forth has also sort of tinged with white idolizing us. Well, that the very translation of America as 美国, you probably know what it means, beautiful country. It takes just one syllable out of America, that second syllable, me, very close to the Chinese word 美, and then translate that. Why didn't they choose the first syllable, which is what they did with Africa, becoming the Chinese word for none, negative, anti. So you can see that it's actually very, very complex. The kind of whitewashing is also happening in China in its own context. The whole plastic, surgery, cosmetic surgery is driven by fair skin. I mean, trying to get fair skin, trying to get Western features, idealized Western features, high ridged nose and all that, double-lidded eyes. Yeah, it's sort of shocking. Yeah.
Yes, I have one question. Well, more of an observation. I was sort of somewhat shocked, quite shocked, in fact, of some of these quite despicable pieces of ephemera featuring stereotypes against Chinese immigrants in America. Perhaps I could end on a somewhat upbeat note. Some years ago, I was negotiating with the American authorities to bring from Australia to New York and a family heirloom, a chest of mahjong, an ivory mahjong set. And the thing that allowed me to bring it in was in one of the drawers of the chest, I found 2 pieces of ephemera, which were the original brochures that that were printed for the game of Wangpu.
Wangpu.
I think. Hang on, I have the ephemera here. Anyway, it was the game of 100 intelligences. And it was made for the colonials, colonial trade, Australia, India, Africa perhaps, people from, I guess, England, who were living in other countries. And it was, I think it did pay some attention to the intelligence of this game. It's quite complex.
But it's also very interesting how the representation of Asians, particularly Chinese, is always associated with the whole notion of luck, of gambling, mahjong, a game of mahjong. Don't forget, Crazy Rich Asians, this film that is so popular, opens with a game. You remember the game theory that Rachel Chu is demonstrating to her New York University economics class, and wins it, obviously, and ends, sort of the film is bookended by gambles. So the card game at the very beginning, and the mahjong game at the end that Rachel Chu deliberately loses to her lover's mother, therefore wins in the end. So it's very interesting to think about why sort of the West is sort of dissociating I am scientific and technology, I am modernity, and sort of exercising all the pre-modern superstition, a game of chance, all the way to the other side of the Pacific Ocean. So all these things are always associated, and it really clicks. That's why Crazy Rich Asians is so popular.
Thank you so much for your talk. It was really wonderful, and I wish I could have heard the whole thing. I have a bunch of questions, but I'm going to limit myself to one, or try to limit myself to one. It's my understanding that we really have no surviving letters by Chinese railroad workers from the 19th century. I'm wondering if you know of any surviving letters or sort of memoirs or anything like that by late 19th or early 20th century Chinese laundrymen.
There's actually a collection of that. I can, find the title for you. There's actually a collection of that. You're absolutely right there, about the laundrymen. So there is a collection of that.
A published collection or a collection?
Published collection.
Oh, okay.
Right, but you're absolutely right. There's really not any sort of surviving document about the railroad workers. You're right.
Thank you.
Thank you.